further ado, let's now kickstart the first session with our first speaker, Frank Lee, who is the Managing Director and founder of JDI. Frank has over 15 years of experience in scaling businesses overseas. Since 2016, he has advised more than 200 companies on their tech talent recruitment strategy in Vietnam and has experience in growing offshore tech teams from 0 to 40. Frank's topic is from outsourcing to offshoring, different models of getting tech done in Vietnam.
Okay, Cheryl, can you see my screen right now?
Yes.
Okay, hope it's better. Yeah, breaks up again. Cheryl, please tell me so that I can try and figure out any other ways. All right, thank you very much for that. I see you're now coming in. Yeah, so I'll talk about the team structure and how we can set up your different team structures accordingly, right? And also talk more about the salaries budgeting piece, because when you are setting up your overseas team, it is not just about the salary. There's also other things to consider, which is like the labor contribution, setting up your own offices, hiring admin staff to help you to grow your operations in Vietnam. The other part, the last part I would be talking about is some of the success factors like communication on HR pieces, because setting up an overseas team, it's a different from somebody else's team. You want to really own the team, and to do that, there needs to be a lot of different HR practices put in place to do this, right? Okay, jumping into the operational models itself. Just now I mentioned in slide. There is 4 different types of model, right? So most of the time, the companies, if as a startup, you would love it if you can have your own CTO in Singapore. I assume I'm talking from the point of assuming that most of you are based in Singapore. I may be wrong. Yeah, but most of the time, what we see is for startups, they would really love their CTOs to be based in Singapore. They have everybody growing in Singapore, whereby it's close to the business and get everything up and running fast and smooth. But of course, situation doesn't really allow that most of the time, because it's really hard to get a tech co-founder in Singapore, right? They are either in the banks or in some of the fast-growing unicorns, etc. The cost is going to be hard, and if you cannot afford to hire, if you could look for people within your existing network to be your CTO, then that's great. But not everybody can find their CTO that way. So in this case, right, if you don't have the CTO in Singapore, it's going to be really hard for you to grow the team in Singapore itself more. Right. Of course, the cost is going to be high because salaries are going up across the roof. So what do some of the companies then do? They try and see whether they can get resources overseas, right? So the first thing that they will do is basically outsourcing. They will go and find third-party agencies overseas and see, oh, I want to develop something. I want to develop my MVP. So can you help me to do this? A lot of time it will make sense because this is very traditional. There's a third-party agency out there. You see how good they are at doing what they've been doing previously, and then you go and try it, and then you work it out on a scope basis, trying to get your development, your specs out, and so you get the third-party agency can come in to help you to do development. Now, this is actually a very good way to move forward because you don't actually spend a lot of time and resources trying to form the team yourself because you're using the third-party agency's existing team. It's faster to go out market that way, but be prepared to fight over timeline, scope, and prices because it's always about the specs. How clear are the specs over there? If you don't have your own product manager, that's going to be hard because you need the product specs to be very nicely detailed out before you can engage third-party outsourcing. Right. So some of the companies, startups, they actually have their own tech people, maybe not experienced as CTO, but they find that this in-house tech person can actually manage other developers, but they just do not have the hands and legs. In that case, you may consider getting freelancers instead of outsourcing fully the project itself. Freelancers can be remotely engaged. They may be working for other companies. They may be working as professional freelancers out there. You can engage them and pay by a per hour basis. So that process, you basically go and find who are these freelancers. You can talk to them and see whether they have the capability to deliver. And then you engage them on a per hourly rate basis. So it's very fast free to go about this on both sides. The fast free part is basically whatever they do for you, you pay by the hour. At any point of time in the future that you find that, hey, it's not really working out or they're small scope, you can easily terminate the working relationship, or you can hire more freelancers to add to the team. It's quite cost effective that way. But to achieve that, you need your own experienced product manager and or CTO to manage these deliverables. Because a lot of time they'll be asking you, what do you want me to develop? If you can't tell them that, they can't really help you. And also another bad point about remote freelancers is that it's not really reliable, and it's really unscalable for the long-term engagement, because you may not be their only customer. They will be freelancing for other clients as well. And as the other clients grow, they may find that more of their time is being drawn to the others. Simply because they are not working for you full-time, then they have to use their time elsewhere. So you may find your project getting delayed as you are working with freelancers. In fact, even their personal matters may come into hand. They may say, "Oh, I'm getting married on this Saturday, or I'll have a family event, so I cannot help you do that thing." Well, they have the right because they are freelancers, right? So you have to be always engaging them on this case-by-case basis as you are doing your development with them. Now, most of the time, as most of the time you want to engage on this model because of cost efficiency, and you're typically at the angel or seed stage growing your team. If you're at a further stage, you may still engage freelancers to do some smaller project-based development. But as you grow, you will find that outsourcing and freelancing may not be the best way to do because of the lack of control over timeline, lack of control over scope, the lack of control over pricing, right? So in those cases, then you would think about how can you bring this development in-house. And you either go out to the country by yourself, be it Indonesia, be it Vietnam, be it Philippines, and then you set up your own team over there. And that will take some time to do because it's not just about developers, it's about the whole operations itself. Or you could engage third-party offshore service providers to help you do all these administration stuff like the recruitment, the HR, the payroll, office spacing as well. So this is typically when companies are growing to a certain level, when they have Series A or Series B funding, and they need more control, more long-term cost effectiveness, more ownership of the team, more ownership of the manpower so that you can deliver on your product roadmap. That's when you go and engage an offshore third-party service provider to really scale up your production line. So some good points about it. Yes, you have more long-term cost effectiveness, you have better ownership of the team, but there are also negatives to this. One of them is the higher ramp-up time, because this is about bringing people into your company. So you need to go through a process of recruitment, a process of culture onboarding, process of testing whether they suit the culture and whether they can really do development for you. So it's a long-term engagement, right? Even the recruitment process, onboarding process may take 2 months, 3 months because of the recruitment and the selection process overheads, right? And of course, there's also the cost to build up a team. Is your Singapore admin person going to be handling them? How are you going to handle overseas payroll? How are you going to handling the performance review? How are you going to handle all the product specifications from Singapore over to the other country? So all this will add on to your cost to time in terms of actual money and also time to build a team. But this seems to be the normal pathway that we see for companies that's growing from angel to seed to Series A, Series B. Right, 4 different models. So if you have any more questions about these models, feel free to email me and we can go into more in-depth discussion on what model suits you at your current stage now. Team structure. So when we're talking about overseas team structure, it could be small, it could be big, right? So this is what we see normally out there. If you're looking for simply to get some development work done and you are looking to hire 1 to 3 person, right? The most important thing is really who the people are, right? Who do you bring on board? The first hire, it doesn't really matter. Most of the time, you will be going for a back-end developer, maybe a senior back-end developer or a senior front-end developer or senior mobile developer, right? So in these cases itself, some of the time you'll be in the thinking of should I go and hire these people or should I just freelance or outsource these project scope? Sometimes you are right in the consideration, because if it's a 1 to 3 person, the scope of deliverables isn't that much out there, isn't that much to be done. So does it make sense for you to jump through all the efforts to really build up an overseas team structure just for these 1 to 3 developers? Sometimes it may not be. So you may want to consider freelancing or outsourcing at the early stage. And you will not really see any value in offshoring due to the administration and the communication overheads. Yeah, so if you look at on a per headcount basis, yes, it may make sense because it's about half the price or less of Singapore dollars, right? But you will also know that there is also communication costs involved. How do you go and have the mental model of communication costs? You look at the people from Singapore side, you look at the people in the overseas team. Whenever they talk to each other, there must be a communication, and that communication involves one person on a Singapore Singapore manpower cost versus one person in Vietnam or Indonesian manpower cost. So you need to add up these two costs and divide by 2 for the communication. So if you're only having 1 to 3, your communication loop is really going to be one Singapore side to talk to one Vietnam side, or 1:3. So there is not that much savings in terms of communication. You cannot aggregate this communication cost. So in the end, yeah, you will find that your Singapore headcount will be overwhelmed with trying to manage this. And the results is you would, yeah, even though it's cheaper in terms of a headcount basis, but your efficiency drops maybe 20–30%, then it becomes to wonder of, yeah, how much value do you really get out of this? But if the purpose is to grow, for the potential to grow as you scale, then it makes sense. Because once you scale a bigger team overseas, right, your communication cost typically remains the same. You may have one Singapore to talk to, one Vietnam or Indonesian, and that person can work with 2 or 3 or 4 other developers, or even 5 other developers in Vietnam, and where there's less communication cost involved between the Singapore side, and therefore you can scale that way. Right. So yeah, and most of the time this is what our clients also go with us for. For 1 to 3, they may see a little bit of savings, but their intention is to really scale with us in the long run. So when you are growing, let's say after the 3 person is hired already, it could be a 1 senior backend engineer, 1 senior front-end engineer, and then maybe coupled by another 1 backend or front-end engineer, or even mobile developer. That's when you start to find that, hey, it makes sense now for you to scale and hire more people. Right. So in that case, you need to identify who's your team lead. It could be an existing person from your 1 to 3 headcount at the start. It could be somebody that's been brought in with a stronger skill set in backend development or front-end development, and asking him to lead the rest of the team. So in a 3 to 5 person structure, it could be a senior backend engineer as a team lead, and basically a front-end engineer and 2 backend front-end less senior engineers to support the team, and be a mobile developer or even a QC. So the important thing is that you want to have a senior person as a team lead, so that you can lead the direction for the rest of the developers. Most of the time it's a back end, because back end seems to be the more important part of the development. Front end somehow is easier to replace because of how the segregation of work is being done. Now, if you're growing a team to be bigger, maybe 5 to 10% already, or if your intention is to grow to 5 to 10% at the start, so your most important person, and typically your first hire would be the TPM, the technical project manager, who has 8+ years of experience in managing teams. Now, so this 8+ years of experience is going to be important. You've got to ask him whether he has managed a team before, right? Because at this point of time, when we are at 5 to 10%, there is more human resource work, communication work between the developers. It's not just hardcore development anymore already. It's about managing the team, setting the vision of the team, making everybody work together as a group. So with a TPM in, he is able to go and also help you to validate and evaluate and bring on board more front-end, back-end engineers, and really form a team around him. Yep. So it could be senior back-end, front-end, etc., and QA, and even the UI UX designer to be a part of the team. Now, if you grow more than that, which is mainly typically at Series A and B level, you really need somebody who is strong and taking care of all the project management and the people resource management. And that's typically a VP of engineering that you're looking for, or country manager. So at that point of time, it can vary differently based on what is being currently done in the Singapore side, because the overseas side is really to complement the short force of the Singapore team. Right? It could be department-based or maybe module-based development. Maybe it could be professional services to service some clients, etc. So that it really depends on a company-to-company basis. Right? We can talk more about team structures if you feel free to email me, then we can look at what is more suitable for you. But a lot of time, your CTO would have an understanding and the idea of how he wants it to be already. I move on to the part of budgeting. So I stress again, budgeting is not just a take-home pay. So a lot of time, take-home pay is what the person gets into his bank account, right? But on top of that, there is also the income tax, the social contribution, which is CPF in Singapore. So if you add all this in Vietnam itself, it's gonna be about 127% of the take-home pay. Then on top of that, there's also other employer side contribution and laptop, office space, all the admin fees, etc. So $1,000 take home, maybe 1,008 in total for all the people. So it's going to be pretty significant, yeah, over there. So yeah, later on in any of the cost building model itself, we need to account for this because your finance may come and ask you about all these matters already. Because when you're talking about overseas team, you need the involvement of the founders, the HR, and also the finance team because it affects all three of them. Okay, some of the salary guide in Vietnam is over here. Just for cost comparison basis, you would find that I myself find that salaries have gone up. Right, in 6 years ago in Vietnam itself, I would have maybe around 70% of this cost over here, or even 60% of this cost over here. But it has been rising fast. So in fact, most of the hottest person that our clients are looking for is the senior developer role with more than 4 years of experience, typically between 4 to 6 years. And that's going to cost in terms of USD about 1,009 to 2,006 on the gross salary basis. Gross salary. So I go back to this model itself. That's the gross salary over here. But after you adding everything up of all the social contribution, laptop, etc., it may come out to about 2,000 to about even 3,000 to 4,000 USD if you load everything in, right? So is it cheap anymore? I don't think it's as cheap as previously that when I first came to the Vietnam market. But of course, in Singapore, the salaries are also going through the roof. In fact, it's a global problem, right? So it is to be expected that tech salaries are going through the roof everywhere else. So it's now there's more demand than supply out there of developers. So yeah, so of course this is in any case it is lower than what you see in Singapore price. Now, these prices are changing all the time. Even over every 6 months, we try to update our salary guide to reflect the current situation in the market itself. Feel free to talk to us more about how do you do the salary apportioning and whether you can suit your budgeting or not. So some of these numbers that we are getting is from job boards, from published recruitment reports, and also our internal review because we are doing recruitment all the time. So we have our internal data to go and benchmark against. All right, so I will skip more of this, the salary. So you would find that the most hired is really the senior developer and the tech lead roles. UI UX sometimes can be freelance, but as you grow bigger, you want to bring it in-house. QA is normally to support as your team grows bigger because the bugs will always be there. So you need bug killers to be there to help you stamp out the bugs together with the developers. As you grow bigger, automation, data, and clouds are typically for bigger teams that we see out there. When they have more data to play with, they have more infra to play with. And IT support as well. So over here in this piece, I want to point out the management salaries is getting pretty high. We are talking about those very senior roles, more than 7 years of experience to be a principal engineer or software architect, or even the CIO, CTO. It could go 8K to 18K. Now, I would say that these are typically for MNCs kind of pricing when they're going into the market, having 50, 100 man kind of salaries. But generally, it also affects the principal engineer as well as the engineering manager, which is the more important roles if you're growing a 30-man team to 50-man team. Right. So other than that, I will skip budgeting. But all in all, I won't go too much about this. It's really a comparison between Vietnam and Singapore. So you would see that it's if you take 100% higher in Singapore costing, it could be around as 100%. Then you will see that if you take on the work pass, it may be lower 86%. But I stand to be corrected because I think the EP price in Singapore is also going higher. Right, before you can hire EP. So in Vietnam, you are probably looking at half the kind of costing after all the consideration. So I go on to the next part about success factors, which actually there's a lot more detail over here. How much time do I have left? 20 minutes. I think my time is really short over here, but never mind. I will skip through this very fast because actually my next two speakers after this is going to talk about this and they are going to be giving you the first-hand advantage. So I'll just broadly share about basically for overseas team, what's important is the communication because they are speaking English, but it's a bit different from Singlish. and different English differs from places to places. So a lot of time you expect the communication to be compromised, right? And when you have to really focus on all your communication tools to make things easier for communication, make everything straight out clear. And we also talk about the sharing of information. Because you are building an overseas team, you are not really outsourcing every development. So in this case, it's important for them to know what's happening in your HQ site, to really share so that they feel part of the team. I cannot stress this further, that it's important to let them feel it's part of your team, because if you don't, they will feel that they're outsourcing and they may just jump to another company for outsourcing. Right. So you want to build a culture over there, you want to build a belonging over there, so they will stay with you for the long term. Engagement as well. Yeah, engage them, share your vision, mission, culture, and make sure there's a culture fit before that. Have more cross-border section, more cross-border interactions with them as you build. Right. So the knowledge about the ops chart is also important, because they're overseas, they don't know who to talk about any issues. Just bring them all on board, have in one place, HR comes into play, and then tell about all the communication channels. And also the strong leader part is important. You need a strong local leader to hire to manage the team over there. Right. So please, I think my next two vendor speakers are also going to stress more that remote teams are not outsourcing vendors. Do not treat them like outsourcing vendors, to pressure them on the timeline, etc., because that will compromise the quality of development and the morale as well. So, and have a localization plan. You are global from day one, but you still must you must localize for the local culture and stuff. And also have performance review with them, so that they will feel that whatever they are doing, they are being fed back on what's good, what's not good, and how to be better. Other of this culture, I think I'll skip through this very fast. It's really about, I think if you go to Vietnam, you find this out yourself about the community spirit that they have, and you also learn from the people from your team, all the local culture, the leisure culture of beer, coffee, and soccer with them. Yeah, I think this is my last slide already, right? So very important, Vietnam has always been seen as a base for you to outsource your team to build your overseas team, right? But it's getting more important now that we see as a market, because with 100 million population, with a fast growing GDP and more disposable income, we will see that this market is, after Indonesia, one of the more promising markets in Southeast Asia to go into. So many of our clients who came to us first to build their tech teams, they have also further progressed to find out, hey, since we are already in Vietnam, can we do business over there? So we've been seeing growth in the e-commerce, fintech, edutech, IoT manufacturing space over in Vietnam itself. And investors are going there too. So Olivia previously came over, he found that it was a very interesting market. He set up his Phoebe Ventures, $25 million Vietnam focused fund. And we are seeing more of these investors going over there as well. Okay, I think that's the end of my slide. Please feel free to contact us through our various communication channels. Yeah, I am done. Thank you, Cheryl. I hand this back to Cheryl.
Okay, thank you, Frank, for the insightful sharing on the topic, and I'm sure our audience has learned a lot about the different working models to engage tech development in Vietnam.